Hi, welcome to Overthinking Entrepreneur. I'm Megan, and I've had a successful online business for a few years now, and I think I overthought probably about 90% of my decisions along the way. Honestly, I just overthought whether I should say 90% or pretty much every decision in this intro. So if you find that relatable, you are definitely in the right place. In this podcast, I will help you get out of overthinking and into action so that your online business can finally start growing. Have you ever gotten a message or a comment from someone that really upset you? Whether they are mad at something you did, whether they are mocking your business or doing something disrespectful, whether you just didn't like the way someone spoke to you or the way they're seeming to be entitled, or whether it seems like someone is like testing you or playing some sort of game with you, right? I don't list these off to put in your head that this is going to happen often. My experience has not been that this happens often. I've worked with hundreds of people over the years. I've encountered, thousands of people in my group, and I've worked with a lot of people at this point. Let's just say I've always had a low ticket business model. So I have worked with a lot of customers in order to sustain my income and just make sure that I'm able to survive on my business. So there are some people who they make great money, but a lot of what they sell is like $10,000 coaching packages. So they might only work with, 10 clients a year. That's not been me. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, okay? And I really have not had many of these encounters. And I think part of that is myself, the way I present myself, the integrity that I have with my business, and a lot of that. But I think that if you're in business long enough and if you're putting yourself out there enough, it's inevitable that you're going to have a handful of comments, at least over the years, that upset you in some way, whether it's a message, whether it's a comment, something that someone has said that you find upsetting. And if you've never really thought about how you'll handle it, it's easy to handle it badly. So I want to just talk to you about what I think are the most important steps and things to keep in mind if you find yourself in this situation and you aren't quite sure what to do, because it's one of those things you don't want to be unprepared for. You don't want to spend a lot of time obsessing over this or thinking about it either. When it happens, but I think the fact that you've thought a little bit about it, even just by listening to this episode, will set you up to hopefully not have to learn from your mistakes, because I've had a few mistakes that I've had to learn from, and I've had other people handle situations in ways where I think they really could have stood to learn something from the situation as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode, is just what do you do if someone makes a rude comment or is mad at you or says something that has upset you or like triggered you in some way, made you feel emotional or frustrated or hurt. So the first thing, the most important thing, take a pause. Do not respond when you are feeling emotional. If you take nothing else away from this podcast, please take away this. Do not take any actions when you are still feeling emotional about it, whether you are mad, whether you are hurt, whether you are confused, whatever it is. Do not take action while you're still in that emotional place. Do not respond to them. It is fine to ignore a message. And I think this is where I got a little bit caught up in the beginning, was that I thought, okay, if I open a message and they can see that I've opened and read it, that means I need to respond right now. And when you are still feeling emotional, when you're still upset about whatever this thing is, right? And we've all been through this. You get a piece of news or you read a message, you read a comment, an email comes through, right? Something happens and you have that moment where it feels like, whoa, what's like my whole world is unshaky. And especially if you are a very non-confrontational person like myself, if you handle confrontation like a pro, and maybe if you have more experience of this in like your day job or something else, it might not faze you as much. But if you're someone like me, where you'll kind of go through the stages of like, wait, what's happening? Oh my gosh, I can't believe they said this. I'm hurt. I'm upset. Or, why would they do this? Or whatever it may be. Process through those. Take the time that you need to feel the feelings, and do not take a single action until you have leveled off emotionally, until you have regulated your own emotions around the situation. And that might be 24 hours. That's fine. That could even be a little bit longer. I would not let it go. If it's going to take you more than 24 hours, I probably would send something like, okay, like some sort of response acknowledging what they've said and letting them know that you're thinking about it and we'll get back to them soon. That way they're not like left in that limbo of like, okay, what's going on here? But do not, if they're asking you a question or if they're trying to say that you owe them a refund, or if they're mad about something, or, whatever it may be, Do not respond or make any decisions while you are still feeling emotional. This is really important. I've had this happen. I've had this on both ends. I've had myself respond sooner than I should have. And there are certain situations where it feels more pressing to respond than others. And I get that. And, I've also had that issue of like, well, if they see that I've read it, I need to respond right away. Like I can't just ignore. I can't just, leave it on read. You will be much better served by ignoring it for a few hours or even a day, and then coming back when you can have a clear, level head and say what you want to say instead of reacting from that emotional place. Trust me. Ask me how I know, right? It's because I've sent a few. I don't think I've ever sent anything that I am completely like, I'm even just thinking back through right now and I'm like, I can't come up with any examples of a time where I said something like completely inappropriate or completely unhinged or completely what I would not want to say because I was emotional. But I've definitely phrased things and said things and done things in ways that if I had just taken that pause and let myself calm down and really think logically about what I wanted to do, that's not what I would have said. And that's what I think is really important to keep in mind. I've also experienced this on the other end where I've had collaborations and people that I've worked with over the years and situations. And I've had times where when someone said something to me that like pretty irreparably damaged a relationship, and I'm like, man, they really should have taken that pause. Like I can just tell if they would have taken a pause and responded tomorrow, this would have gone differently. But it just is what it is. So I apply this to my own personal life as much as I can as well, but especially in business, okay? This is on you. You're a business owner. You need to conduct yourself as a business. Other people who are your customers, now I think all humans should just treat each other with respect, but that doesn't seem to be as universal of as a belief as you would think that it is, right? But your customer does not have the same level of responsibility to conduct themselves in a professional way with integrity as you do. This is your business, not theirs, okay? So this is not a situation where we sink down. Like if you have someone who's intentionally being rude or difficult, that does not mean that you hit them right back with that, okay? And if this is something that you need to work through, like this might even be something that you might want to talk to a therapist or some sort of trusted mentor, or find some books you can read, podcasts you can listen to about your own, whatever's going on with you that makes you want to lash out at people, because you cannot be doing that as a business owner. And it is your responsibility to figure that out. Other people are going to say what they say, but your reaction to what they say is your responsibility. And you can't just be flying off the handle and going on all these rants and doing all of these things as a business owner and then calming down the next day and saying, "Oops, sorry, I just have a temper. I was so mad." That's not going to work as a business owner, okay? So it is your responsibility to learn to take that pause and then learn to get your own self to more of that calm place where you can objectively look at the situation and then decide what you want to do. Okay, next step. I know I talked about take a pause for a long time, but I think it's the most important thing here. I'm going to give you more specifics about, how to handle different situations and what I would do with them, but that's the most important thing. Take that pause. Do not respond when you are still feeling emotional. Same thing about any post ideas or anything that you want to share. If you're still feeling upset or emotional about something, it's not time to share it yet. Wait until you can share from that calm, level-headed place, because that's what you're really going to look back on in the future and feel proud of the way that you shared. And that's what's really going to help other people, not those raw emotions that really should have stayed inside thoughts, right? Okay. Now, next thing we want to do is we want to reread what this person said and make sure that you fully understand, because it can be really easy to misinterpret what other people are saying. It can be really easy to misinterpret intentions. I have been married to my husband. Our wedding anniversary is actually sneaking up really fast. I forgot. It's sneaking up on us. It's been a couple years now, but we've been together for 13 years. Is that right? Something like that. We were friends for years before that. We know each other really well, and we still misinterpret things that the other one says sometimes. Not often. It's not like a common thing, but we still have these issues, and we know each other super, super well and have for many years. So it stands to reason that someone who maybe you've just met kind of recently online and you don't know them in real life, and maybe they have very different life experiences and perspectives and just personality and way of speaking to you, just make sure that you even fully understand what this person is saying, because you might read something one way and think they mean A, but actually they mean B. And if you react, especially if you don't take that pause and you think they mean A and that makes you mad, and then you react to that and they say, well, okay, now you've reacted badly. And then you come to find out that's not even what they meant. They actually meant B. And you're like, oh, this is, again, it's your responsibility to manage your reactions, to manage the things that you say and the way that you say them. This is really important, and that responsibility falls on you and no one else. You alone, okay? If you want to find someone, like if you want to hire me as your coach, I am happy to read over, please don't just start asking me to do this if you're not a paying client. It's not that I don't want to help you for free. I wish I could help everyone for free. I just, when you open that whole can of worms, it goes badly. But I have always told people I am more than happy. Over the years, I've gotten pretty good at how to phrase and have these tough conversations. And so you can, me or another coach, another mentor, or, if you're in my membership, whatever, I'm always happy to take a look at, like, here's the situation, what's going on, and read over what you said or tell you how I would respond. And there's lots of other people that can help you with that, but you need to be the one to ask for help, okay? This is a you responsibility for your business. Okay, so we're making sure that we fully understand what that person said. And you can either show it to someone else, so find that trusted friend or mentor or whoever and say, hey, how do you interpret this message or this email? Or, and I wouldn't even start by telling them what you think it says. I would just let them take a crack at it and see. And if they come to the same conclusion as you, then, there's a good chance that probably is what it is. But if they interpret it differently, you just really want to keep that in mind. So, because we don't want to respond to or be mad about something that someone isn't even saying. Many times we read into what we think they're saying, or we project, or whatever. So it's really important that you make sure that you're even reacting to what this person is really saying. So especially if it's in text, like if it's written, sometimes we can assign an angry tone when they did not write it with a hint of an angry tone whatsoever. Like it can be really easy to misinterpret what the other person is saying. So if you think there's any wiggle room, if there's any chance, or you're like, they cannot possibly be saying what I think they're saying, right? Like the audacity, then you can ask them to clarify. You can just say, hey, this is what I'm getting from this message. Is that what you meant to say? Or am I understanding this correctly? Or like, do not get defensive. Do not fire back. Do not say, oh, heck no, I know that's not what you're saying to me, right? That's not what we're doing. We're clarifying if you're unsure. Now, if you're completely positive you understand what they're saying, fine. But just make sure that you're really positive that you understand what they're saying and that you are correct about what they're saying. So if you need to ask questions, like I said, that is fine. Ask some clarifying follow-up questions. I was kind of trying to say both words at once, and it sort of neither one really came out. But ask them some questions. Make sure you're on the same page. Make sure you're both having the same conversation, and do not go right to the defense mode or right to attack mode. Do not, like, as soon as you almost want to think about it like two dogs that are meeting, right? Like right now you're two dogs that are just kind of sniffing around each other. But if one of you bares your teeth and growls, it's going to turn into a fight, right? And that's not what we want until we even find out, well, that's not what we want in general. That's not how I'm going to recommend that you handle any of your situations, even if this person is being a complete jerk. But you need to make sure that you don't accidentally be the first one to growl when that's not even what they were saying. So, okay, just make sure that you understand. And then once you understand fully what they're saying and you totally get it, then you kind of decide, is an action needed here? How do I want to handle this? What do I need to do here? And you want to make sure that you're hearing what they're saying with an open mind. Sometimes people come to me with things that at first I'm like, why would they say that? Or why would they suggest that? Or that doesn't even make sense. But then later on, when I stop and think about it from a different perspective, and remember, different people are different than you. There have been times where I set up something that I thought was going to work great, and then other people found it difficult to understand or follow or interpret because they weren't me and they weren't in my brain. And so you always just kind of want to ask yourself, okay, is an action needed here? Like, is someone making a valid criticism or complaint or suggestion? Should I take this into consideration and make some changes? And if so, awesome. Thank them for their suggestion. There's also times where people have suggested something or maybe complained or said, I wish something was this way, and it's just not feasible. And I think that's also fine. You don't have to, even just if something is a good suggestion, it doesn't mean you have to do it. there's been a lot of times where I've said to someone, that's a really great idea, but here's why I can't do that, or here's why that's not going to work. And when you respond that way, instead of just saying, nope, I'm not going to do that, you're making them feel heard and seen and saying, yeah, I think that is a really good idea and I would love to do that. And, maybe I'll do that in the future, or, whatever. But that way you're not just blowing them off and they feel heard. And that way the relationship will hopefully continue untarnished, because both sides heard each other out. Both sides explained their perspective, and, you were able to move on from that. So sometimes an action is needed and sometimes it's not. And even in that example there, right? Like the action could just be, hey, thank you, I love that idea, but I'm just not going to do it. Or I hear you, and, here's how I think that we can move forward with a solution here. Sometimes if a person is just like sometimes you don't have to respond to everything. So there's a lot of different things that can kind of fall in this category of a message or a comment that upsets you. It could be someone saying, I think your program is terrible and I want a refund. Or it can be someone leaving a comment on a post that you made that basically implies that they're skeptical of what you're saying. Those are totally different situations. So we really just have to look at what's going on here. So this is why I say decide if an action is needed. If someone left a comment that you thought was rude and it kind of bothered you, but it's really not that big of a deal, you might not need to do anything. You might just decide to just leave it and just say, you know what, I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. I'm just going to move on. And I think when things commented or shared more publicly like that, you want to just keep that in mind. Like I think that the way that I would, not necessarily the way that I would handle it is different, like in terms of what the resolution would be or the way I would conduct myself. But I do think that whether something is being discussed privately or more publicly can impact kind of your time frame and what you say and all that kind of stuff. So if someone has left, say, a rude comment on one of your posts, basically implying that you are a fraud or your product doesn't work or that your business is a scam or whatever, right? Let's just run with this example. Then you can kind of decide for yourself, okay, what do I want to do here? And the first thing that I seek to do is try to understand their intention. And honestly, I do this as well. Like kind of when we were talking about making sure you understand, I do this with anything, even if this is a more private message, even if this is similar to that example I just gave of someone who wants a refund from you. My goal is always to kind of understand what is this person's intention, because there are people out there who, buy things. And I had a friend who had a really rough situation a few years ago where someone signed up for her thing and then they reached out and they wanted a refund for it. And she had like a no refunds policy in place, which they knew, and they wanted a refund because something came up and they decided they couldn't afford it anymore. And she was like, no, I don't really feel good about a refund in this situation. Like, you knew what you were signing up for. It's been delivered. Like, there's no issue in terms of what you were provided. Like, you just made a poor decision and now you want me to refund. And, when you have to give out a refund, oftentimes you lose money if you give a full refund because there's the processing fee, the refund, all of that. So anyway, this person like escalated it all the way up to like a PayPal complaint and was trying to get it refunded. It ended up not happening because they were in the wrong, because there was nothing wrong with the product. But you just kind of have to seek to understand like what is their intention, because the way this person came at, well, first of all, it was very rude, the way they were explaining as well. But their reason for why they thought they deserved a refund just, it just wasn't a reason why they should deserve a refund. But if they had come instead and said, hey, look, I signed up thinking this was going to be XYZ based on the way you marketed it and based on what's on the sales page, but I'm finding that that's not really what's included. And, I'm a little bit, confused and frustrated. Now, I think that's a very different situation. And this is where you can either work with that person to help them look at it differently, to help them see the result, to, point them in a different direction, or possibly add something to what they signed up for that maybe you're like, you know what, you're right. That would be a great addition. And I'm going to get, like you can decide how you want to handle that. Or I think that could also be a situation where a refund could possibly be justified depending on everything that's happened. There's a lot of specifics that kind of go into that. But my goal is to seek to understand, like with that first example, that person was operating from a selfish place. And I don't mean to say that person is selfish. I don't know the details of what happened in their life or, what made them desperate enough to try and seek a refund for such a small amount. But it, basically, you just kind of want to look at like, what is their intention here? And that person's intention was just because they wanted to get a refund back because it would be more convenient for them, but there wasn't really a reason behind it. Whereas someone else who is coming at you and is not mad, but is just sort of expressing that they're a little bit dissatisfied with what they got and that it didn't match their expectations, that person has a very different intention. Same thing with a comment that someone might leave on your post or your video or whatever. If someone is asking a question because they're uneducated or because they might not understand, versus someone who is intentionally trying to make you look bad or trying to be rude or, trying to come at you. And you just kind of have to figure that out. And it depends on if you know them or not and, decide how you want to handle it. I think that sometimes this can happen with family members as well, and maybe they're just trying to protect you or they don't really understand what it is that you're doing, but they're basically leaving comments that are, hurting your business in some way. Then you can decide, do I want to just remove this comment? Do I want to leave it here? Do I want to reach out to this person and try and have a conversation? And I think a lot of that comes down to the intention. Like if you have an aunt who's worried that you're in some sort of scam and she keeps making all these comments that you're like, would you please stop doing that? Like, I know what, that might be someone worth reaching out to and just saying, hey, let's have a conversation. I will answer whatever questions you have, but I really need you to please stop leaving these comments. And if you won't stop, I'm going to have to block you or whatever. Whereas that cousin that is just intentionally being a jerk and there's no point in talking to them because they're going to be a jerk no matter what, that might be just a instant block, right? Like you're always seeking to understand the intention. Is this person trying to help me or trying to hurt me? Is this person trying to be rude? Is this person maybe just a little bit confused? Maybe they were just a little bit uneducated. Maybe they're, like I always try and understand where is this person coming from. And that will often inform my next move because I want to understand, what's going on here. And I try and put myself into their shoes as much as I can. So then you just want to kind of decide if an action is needed. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes just ignoring, just rising above is the best thing that you can do. Sometimes you do need to respond. I think it's important to just know that like the customer does not always have to be right in your business. You don't have to bend over and cave and do anything that anyone is asking you for just because they're mad. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that you conduct yourself in a way that you're going to feel proud of in the long term. And this is why if you don't take that pause and you respond out of anger or fear or frustration, or when you're having a really bad day and you respond, and then the next day you come back and you look at what you said and you're like, oh man, I really wish I wouldn't have said that. And that's where taking that pause is so huge. You always just want to ask yourself, in the long term, what's going to make me feel good about how I handled this? Because at the end of the day, that's like, you're never going to make everyone else happy. I try my best to make sure that everyone who has worked with me, purchased from me in some way, feels good about the experience, but it's just impossible to make every single person happy, right? You're always going to have someone who's disappointed or frustrated or whatever it may be. So for me, the most important thing is, did I handle that in a way that I feel good about and that I'll feel good about in the long term? That's what I'm always focused on. And something that I'll ask myself often is, if the roles were reversed, how would I want them to treat me? What would I want them to say? And also just remember that you often don't know what's going on in someone's life. You just don't. And so it may seem like someone's coming at you unnecessarily, but maybe they just had the worst week of their entire life and they took it out on you, and that wasn't fair. But you just always have to remember that like you never quite know what's going on with someone else either. And so I try to just proceed with kindness as much as I can and just think about, what am I going to feel good about in the long term? And that does not mean I've not had many people ask me for a refund. And like I said, I've had a lot of customers over the years. So I feel good about the fact that I've had very few refund requests. I have not honored all of them, but I have honored some. And that's the thing. It's often very individual. I took that pause. I listened to what they were saying. I decided whether I thought it was valid or not. And then I thought about how would I want them to handle it if their roles were reversed. And I just really thought about, how can we meet a resolution here? And, what do I think in terms of how can I do something that's going to work for both of us that I'm going to feel really good about in the long term? So, okay, there's my thoughts. I hope that this has helped you. I hope that you don't need to use this episode very often, but I think that it's really helpful to have thought about it. That way, if it does come up, you're not going to feel blindsided and you're going to say, oh, hold on, I need to take that pause, right? That's the most important. If you have two big takeaways, I hope everything I talked about helped you. But what I really hope that you take away from this episode is to take that pause. Don't do anything while you're still feeling emotional about it. and to make the decision that is going to make you feel really good about what you did, your own actions, because at the end of the day, that's really all that you have control over. So make the choice that's going to make you feel good about your actions in the long term. I hope this episode inspires you to go take action on something you have been overthinking. As much as I wish you could, you cannot think your way to success, so promise me you're going to go take some action today. Head over to overthinkingentrepreneur.com to find all the cool stuff I've made for you over the years, like my free guide to getting more social media engagement and my Facebook group, Dynamite Entrepreneurs, which has a free course on social media basics.